Huh?
I text Ray, we'll see.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Huh? I think there was another committee meeting in Memphis. It's motor vehicle.
Motor vehicles, yeah. Good morning. Well, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to ask Representative Chastain to lead us in prayer.
Mr. Chairman, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this day. We thank you for all the blessings of life that you bestowed upon each and every one of us. Lord, we're thankful for just letting us wake up this morning and start the day. We ask that you be with each and every one of us. Be with us as we work today and in this committee, Lord, as we work even on into the day for this great state, and that you would be with us as we make decisions for all of the folks that live here in our state. Lord, we just ask you to watch over us, keep us safe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. That's great. All right. Brother Ben, you're up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good morning. Ben Jordan from the Georgia Automobile Dealers Association. By my count, this is the 5th time we have presented to this committee, so thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. A quick round of introductions because we have some special guests with us. First and foremost, we have 3 members from our board of directors, 3 local franchise dealers with us. Right behind me is Mr. Jason Denson, who drove down from Dalton. He's with Ford of Dalton. To his left is the one and only State Representative Lehman Franklin from the Franklin Automotive Group in Statesboro, Georgia. And to his left is our friend in the Senate, Senator Emanuel Jones from Legacy Ford in McDonough. I'm also joined by our colleagues, or by my colleagues from GADA, Ms. Leah Kirshner, our president and CEO, the boss. And to her left, the one and only Bill Morey, our president emeritus of GADA. Thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. As a quick background, we are the Georgia Automobile Dealers Association, and we represent the interests of the franchise new car and truck dealers in Georgia. Our dealers do business in every part of the state, here in Metro Atlanta, up in the mountains in South Georgia, and on the coast and all points in between. In fact, GADA itself is a small business. We have over 20 employees, and in addition to education and advocacy, GADA also operates a self-insured workers' compensation fund that covers 24,000 employees in Georgia. If there is one point we want to make today, it is this: that franchise car and truck dealers are local businesses. They create local careers. They invest in their local communities. And in fact, many are locally owned, some going back generations. In terms of economic impact, there are just under 500 franchise new car dealers in Georgia. On average, franchise dealers employ 71 Georgians and pay over $90,000 in annual compensation per employee, and that includes commission employees. At GADA, we're very proud of that fact because those are strong middle class and upper middle class jobs available throughout the state, not just here in Metro Atlanta. What do local dealerships do? Well, of course, they are in the business of selling new and used vehicles. In fact, franchise dealers sell about half the used vehicles in Georgia. Dealers also perform safety-critical repair and maintenance services for drivers, including helping consumers enforce factory warranties and handle safety recalls. Some dealerships operate body shops that help with collision repairs. And all dealers will help arrange financing for customers. They'll handle trade-ins, process title and registration. So it is true when we at GADA say that franchise dealers are there to support the customer throughout the entire life cycle of the vehicle. During the pandemic, our federal government declared franchise dealers part of the nation's critical infrastructure because dealers perform these essential services for consumers. So franchise dealers are in fact essential businesses, and because they are essential, state law regulates the relationship between automobile manufacturer and local dealer to ensure that relationship is fair and to ensure the customer benefits. So every state has what we call our franchise law. That's the set of laws that regulates the relationship between automobile manufacturer and new car dealer. But Georgia is unique because our state constitution specifically empowers you, the General Assembly, to pass those laws to ensure that that relationship benefits your constituents and our customers. Not often, but every so often, the General Assembly is asked to update that set of laws, the dealer franchise laws, and there's actually a bill this session that would do just that would update Georgia's franchise laws, and that's Senate Bill 81, sponsored by Senator Matt Brass. As you can see, it did survive the crossover day deadline. It passed the Senate overwhelmingly with a vote of 52-1, with just one senator lone in dissent. What would this bill do? Well, it would touch upon 5 topics in the automobile industry, specifically as it relates to manufacturers, dealers, and consumers. So the first part of the bill is that it would update the legislative findings that are already in code. The second part of the bill has to do with data, and this would give dealers greater ability to control and protect the customer data that's on their dealer management systems. So at the dealership, the computer system that basically runs the whole dealership, it acts as the nerve center, is the dealer management system. And the data that's stored on those systems is obviously very sensitive because it's consumer information about all of us, but it's also very valuable and it's also very necessary for dealers to utilize in order to compete in the modern economy when so much business is now done digitally and electronically. So a couple parts of this bill. The data protection part is probably the most complex part of this bill, but in very short, it would give dealers greater ability to safeguard the data that's on those dealer management systems, which they have to do by federal law. It would allow dealers to share that data, but only with approved vendors and only through secure integrations to make sure that that sharing is also safe. Importantly, it would also allow dealers to back up the data that's on their systems. Why is that important? Well, last summer in June, there was a very significant cyber attack on our industry. It came from a different country, and it was targeted at one of the large companies that run these dealer management systems. But that company had such a stranglehold over all the data, even the data that's on dealer management systems, that as a result of that attack, the dealer management systems for half of the franchise dealers in this country basically shut down. Forcing dealers like these folks to go back to the old school and handwrite repair orders for 2 weeks because they couldn't access the data that was on their data management systems. If they had the ability to back up that data beforehand, we believe they would have been able to restore operations quickly and quicker than they did last year. Not having that ability resulted in $1 billion in lost revenue nationwide as a result of that cyber attack. So data is very important in our business right now, and this bill, we believe, would go a long way to helping dealers control and better protect that data and restore operations in the event of another cyber issue. So there's 3 other parts of the bill. One has to do with over-the-air updates. So like our cell phones, vehicles these days are capable of receiving software updates over the air. Those updates in the automotive world are supposed to enhance the performance of a vehicle or maybe fix something that goes wrong, glitchy software. What this bill would do is say, if the dealer is involved in implementing the over-the-air update and the update itself helps fix something that's covered under warranty, then the dealer should get paid for that assistance just like they would for any other kind of warranty or repair. 2 other parts of the bill: allocation. So, one feature of the local franchise dealer system is that local dealers compete against each other, including dealers of the same line make. So we have 2 Ford dealers here, and they're friends, but they'll be competing against each other day in and day out. Because they compete against each other, allocation becomes a pain point in our industry sometimes. And allocation is simply the amount of vehicles and parts that a local dealer can purchase from their manufacturer. So because it is a pain point, this part of the bill took some extra effort, but here's where we landed. allocation process needs to be more transparent. So what this bill would do is it would say if a dealer wants more information about how their manufacturer decides allocation, the number of vehicles they can purchase and the number of parts, then they can ask the manufacturer for that information, and the manufacturer has to provide that information. We believe that with more transparency, or at least we're hopeful that with more transparency, some disputes around allocation can be better resolved. The last part of the bill has to do with sales from non-licensed locations. This is actually in Title 40 of the Motor Vehicle Code. So in Georgia, like in other states, to be a dealer, whether a new or used car dealer, you need a license. In Georgia, new car dealers are licensed by the Department of Revenue, and current code basically says you cannot engage in the activity of a new motor vehicle dealer unless you have a license and except at a licensed location. But current law doesn't actually define what it means to engage in the activity of a new motor vehicle dealer, and this bill would provide that definition. Why is that important? Because there are at least two companies right now in Georgia who are showcasing new vehicles at locations for which they do not have a license. So these would basically be unlicensed locations. The question arises, what are they doing at those locations? Can they sell? Can they not sell? This bill would clarify for everyone in the industry, all market participants, all manufacturers, all dealers, and for the benefit of the consumers, what can be done at these showrooms and galleries. And what it would do is basically say you can display vehicles at a non-licensed location, but if you start talking price, if you accept a reservation or you take a deposit, start talking about trade-ins or financing, then you need a license, because those are activities that I think all of us associate with being a new car dealer. So a couple quick closing points about Senate Bill 81. It did pass the Senate. It's being carried in the House by Chairman Alan Powell. It has passed through the House Committee on Regulated Industries and is currently under consideration by the House Rules Committee. I mentioned before, it's not every year that GADA asks the General Assembly to update the franchise laws. The last year was 2019, so we're probably due. Most of the provisions in this bill mirror exactly what has already been passed in other states and what the industry is already living with. In fact, GADA can be a little choosy. We choose to find what works best in other states and seek to implement it here. And this bill is certainly a reflection of that. One other point, before GADA even considers coming to the General Assembly with requests to update the franchise law, the first thing we do is sit down with our manufacturer partners and have a discussion with them about some of these topics. So in this case, with Senate Bill 81, we had a meeting with the manufacturers back in October. That was our first meeting before the election. And those discussions continued through November and December and January, and even in February, changes were being made to this bill as it was working its way through the Senate. So the bill that's currently in House Rules, that version, Senate Bill 81, is full of a lot of feedback. It's full of several changes that were made to try to make sure that everybody's operating under fair rules of play to the benefit of the manufacturers and the dealers, and most importantly, the consumers. So if and when this bill does get out of rules and onto the House floor, we'd certainly appreciate favorable consideration. Shifting gears just a little bit before I kick it over to our dealers that are here, I wanted to give just an overview of the market. We've done that before for this committee. So 2024 was a good year in the automotive industry. 16 million new vehicle units were sold. There's some industry analysts who believe that 16 million number is actually the magic number in our industry. And why is that? Well, 16 million vehicles indicates strong customer demand, which corresponds usually with a strong underlying economy. But it also means that the factories are up and running and providing adequate supply to meet that demand. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure you remember a couple years ago we were here, and in the market overview, it wasn't that way. We had strong demand, but not nearly enough supply. So the good news now is that we have both strong demand and supply. A couple other factors driving the market last year, we've seen continued enthusiasm for hybrid vehicles. In fact, the sales of hybrids in 2024 increased 31% compared to 2023. And we also saw incentives across the board from manufacturers. This is what we call cash on the hood. It helps drops the price of the new vehicle, helps move the metal, and certainly a benefit for consumers. We talked about hybrids. What about battery electric vehicles? That's been a conversation in our industry for several years now and off and on here at the Capitol. Well, nationwide, the sale of battery electric vehicles did increase in 2024, but only by 0.8%. Interestingly enough, the market leader in the sales of battery electric vehicles is still Tesla, but their total sales in 2024 actually decreased compared to 2023, while the overall number of EVs increased. So what's going on there? Well, their competitors are catching up, and they're starting to win. And these competitors are legacy automotive manufacturers that have local franchise dealer networks. I included a quote here from Automotive News. One industry observer actually said, consumers are starting to realize that local, at least for electric vehicles, that local dealers are a competitive advantage for these legacy automotive brands because they're there to support the customer after the sale with service. And as you all know, battery electric vehicles, just like all vehicles, do require service after the sale. So a couple quick takeaway points on the market last year from a macro standpoint. I mentioned strong demand and now adequate supply. We saw the return of incentives in our industry, cash on the hood. But that 16 million number of total vehicles sold is also important for the purposes of fleet turnover. What do I mean by that? Well, today's new vehicle is tomorrow's used vehicle. And the new vehicles sold today will be re-entering the market as used vehicles in the next year or 2 or 3. A healthy number of new vehicles sold now will mean a healthy number of used vehicles coming to the market in a couple of years. Why is that important? Because it helps stabilize prices in the used car market. Just a couple of years ago, we saw the opposite of that in the pandemic when the factories had to shut down due to supply chain constraints. And what did that do to the used vehicle market? Well, prices shot up exponentially. They remained volatile. There was even a moment where a used vehicle was selling for more than the new version of that vehicle. So, I'm very biased, but I believe firmly we all should be rooting for a large number of new vehicles sold every year because it helps everyone, including those who choose to buy used or can only afford used vehicles. So that's the macro level. How we doing here in Georgia? Good year in Georgia for new vehicle sales. They did increase 1.6% compared to 2023. Not quite as dramatic of an increase nationwide, but still a good year. The dealers represented here today represent the 3 most popular brands of vehicles sold in Georgia. That's General Motors, Ford, and Toyota. But 2 other popular brands here in Georgia are Kia and Hyundai. And of course, they are making vehicles here in Georgia as well. Collectively, those 2 brands have 13.5% of the new vehicle market. We've also, in this committee in years past, we've also been tracking sales of vehicles by powertrain. And this is some updated data for the committee. So in 2024, about 82% of all new vehicles sold were powered by internal combustion engines. So this would be gasoline and diesel vehicles. That's represented by that large orange slice of the pie right there. Hybrids accounted for 10% of all new vehicles sold, battery electric at 7.2, and plug-in hybrid at 1. So as you can tell, the vast majority of new vehicles sold in Georgia are still gasoline and diesel. However, at last year's presentation, that percentage for ICE vehicles was actually 85%. So as a share of total vehicles sold, ICE vehicles actually decreased in 2023 to 2024, while vehicles sold with alternative powertrains increased. So what's going on there? How can you explain that drop in ICE vehicles? Well, it's the same market trend that's going on nationwide, continued enthusiasm for hybrids. This is a chart that we've shown before with updated data for today. And you can see the green line starting in the first quarter of 2020, carrying through all of 2024, continued steady increase in hybrid adoption. Last year in Georgia, total market share for hybrids increased from 7 to 10%. The blue line represents battery electric vehicles, and you can see an increase in those in 2021 and 22. But starting in 2023, sales of battery electric vehicles have basically plateaued at around 7%, and that's certainly kind of what happened last year in Georgia, and plug-in hybrids holding pretty steady at 1%. So that's kind of a look at the market in review. Going forward, how do dealers feel about the market in 2025? Well, a poll was done in January by Cox Automotive that revealed that dealers were overall fairly optimistic. A couple months have passed since then, so you may hear that from our dealers today. You may hear from some differing opinions. I think overall they remain optimistic, but there are some potential headwinds that could challenge them and challenge sales. I wanted to name just a few of those today. One is a persistent challenge, has to do with vehicle affordability. New vehicles are just expensive, and they've become more expensive. During the pandemic, the average transaction price almost reached $50,000 per new vehicle. Thankfully, that has come down, and it's now under $45,000, but that is still 33% higher than it was before the pandemic in 2019. So we're hopeful, based on some announcements from the manufacturers, that more affordable new vehicles will be coming to market soon. Two other potential challenges that we at least wanted to name, and this gets into some sort of geopolitical concerns. One, of course, is tariffs. That would be tariffs directed specifically at the automotive industry or even at the supply chain that could have impacts on the automotive industry and potentially impact the price of new vehicles. And the other potential headwind is China. China is now the world's largest automotive market, and despite how they got there, there are Chinese companies who are making pretty competitive products now and selling for very competitive prices and gaining market share in other parts of the world. So the quote I included here describes China as a potential existential threat to the automotive industry. So it's certainly something to be aware of along with tariffs. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll kick it over to the dealers that we have present today who, do this for a living. They have skin in the game, capital to deploy. They employ dozens of Georgians. On average, a franchise dealer employs 70 Georgians. They're from all over the state, and we're very pleased to have them with you. If there are any questions from the committee, we'll be here to answer them, but the gentlemen who are with us today are also fully capable of providing you information as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you again and be happy to introduce you all to the GADA board members that we have with us.
Yeah, Ben, that was a great overview. Let's go ahead and get started, and then we'll do questions later.
Perfect.
And Noel, if you would like to sit up here, go right ahead. We don't want to be within range.
Body.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. And I've turned the microphone on the table on. So, Jason, I think you're first, or it doesn't really matter which order.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. These chairs are comfortable, too. I might have to just take a nap here. Well, I'm Jason Denson with Ford of Dalton up in Dalton, Georgia, our lovely carpet capital of the world, just north of us. I attended Dalton State College and left Dalton State to pursue a career in the automotive business in 1997, worked my way through management, and then bought this dealership. I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to buy this in 2018, so our upcoming 7-year anniversary. Several on Georgia Automobile Dealers Association and several other committees and boards throughout Ford Motor Company and local as well. But my workforce and my employees are the backbone of my business. When we bought the store, we had 50 employees. We're now over 100. And, most of them are technicians. And Ben mentioned over-the-air updates. We do a lot of those. But just like when you do an update on your phone, you have problems, you have issues. You don't have to call a 1-800 number. We call. We have remote service. We come out to your house. We do it. We'll change the oil in the vehicle. We'll do those updates if you have an issue. So that's one of the things that's just changed over the last 7 years since we've been doing business. Very proud of our store. We've been voted, just announced yesterday for 3 years in a row, our President's Award winner within Ford Motor Company, which is a reflection of surveys and things that we get back from our customers, or we like to call them our guests. So very, very proud of our staff to be able to do that. We sell and service all kinds of vehicles, not only just Fords. I know it's Ford of Dalton, but we do all kinds. And as I mentioned earlier, our technicians are a vital piece of our business, and they're hard to come by. I think it's easier to, I have a daughter that's about to be a nurse practitioner. I feel like it's easier to find a physician than it is to find a technician. They bring a high price tag. We pay them very, very well, but they're also hard to come by. But what we try to do is start in the middle school level. We partner with a couple of my employees, sit on different tech boards throughout North Georgia, and we try to really start at the middle school level and get in schools and get in these children's minds the technical background and the benefit of that. So we help assist purchase toolboxes for them. I mean, we do just about everything, but pick them up and bring them to work every day. We'll do it. It's amazing too. These technicians and what they make. The average income in Whitfield County's $53,000, and I would say 70% of those make above that, and I've probably got 10 folks that are well over six figures within the technician level. We partner with Junior Achievement Northwest Georgia. Mr. Shaw Industries built a facility there, and so we have a storefront in Junior Achievement. So my staff was there yesterday. We go and we talk to them about budgeting. We talk to them about what it's like to be an adult. So they have a car payment, they have a house payment, they have a cell phone bill, and so we help kind of start that as an early on age to help prepare them for real life circumstances. So we're always looking for great talent. We're always looking for great associates. We are a customer service business. Without our consumers, without our guests, we are nothing. So we try to make sure they are first and foremost the most important part of our business, because without them we'll have nothing. So I have two older children that graduated college, as I mentioned. One's in the medical field. I didn't. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to have the career that I've been because of the automotive business. We all got here today for some sort of a vehicle, so that excites me. I love automotives. We sell tires, we sell brakes, we sell everything. So very passionate about our industry. And again, thank you for your time today. That's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Well,
Senator?
certainly that was enough. I am Emmanuel Jones. I'm with Legacy Ford. I've been in the state senate up here now this is my 21st year, and I've been a Ford dealer for 33 years. And I just want to focus on really the importance of Senate Bill 81 and the impact that it would have on the dealers and why this legislation is so critical. As Ben has already mentioned, the impact that it would have on the franchise dealer. I just want to give you my experience, having been in business for 32 years. When I opened my store in McDonough, I had Ford Motor Company as my DMS. They were my data management provider. Ford Motor Company then a few years later decided they were going to exit that business, and they left all of us, all the Ford dealers, with another independent dealer. That dealer at the time was UCS, Universal Computer System, owned by a gentleman in Texas. I believe his name was Bob Brotman, who's since passed away. And when Ford Motor Company sold that dealer computer system, that fundamentally changed how we interact with vendors in our dealership. Before, we had a direct line to Ford Motor Company. Ford had a direct line to us, and now that was broken because we had to go through another vendor. That other vendor would then go through Ford Motor Company. And Ford essentially had given UCS the rights to their system, and essentially all of the dealers that were under, that was using their system at the time, and that was the majority of Ford dealers. And Brockman, in turn, created a lot of, I hate to use term like wreak havoc, but that's really what I really want to say. But I'm just saying he created a lot of opportunities for us. And I'll give you some examples of what that relationship was like from my perspective. If we had a high-speed printer that go down, we could not get anyone outside to fix that printer. We had to use UCS simply because we didn't own that printer. None of the equipment that they had provided for our management services, our data management services, was all leased to us. And not only that, we couldn't get out of those leases. They were all long-term leases. And they had these automatic renewing clauses in it. So if you didn't catch it at the right time, you were stuck for another 5 to 7 years with that particular vendor. Well, there was a big ruckus and uproar throughout the country with the Ford dealers. And his solution, UCS solution, was, okay, let me go buy another DMS. At the time, Reynolds and Reynolds was fledgling. So UCS actually bought Reynolds and Reynolds, which is, of course, still in business today. And they changed their name. They got rid of UCS because the reputation was so bad with dealers. They weren't getting any new customers. But Reynolds had a lot more customers other than just Ford dealers. And Reynolds and Reynolds continue to operate, and they open up their system. But again, it was still owned by the same company and essentially the same practices. From Reynolds and Reynolds, we then migrated over after 10 more years to a new vendor with CDK. And Ben has already mentioned that some of my colleagues here may use one of these vendors as well, Reynolds or CDK or Tachyon. There's a few others out there in the industry now. But Ben has already mentioned there was a data breach, and I was one of those 50% of the dealers who used CDK, who my store was shut down for well over 2 weeks. And it was in the middle of June, and I happened to be in another part of the world when it happened. So along with my fixed op director who was with me on one of those dealer trips, and it was just kind of chaotic for us. Certainly it impacted my store a lot. And we didn't have access to anything. CDK is vertically integrated in my dealership. From the time a phone call comes in on their CDK phones, that information is shared throughout the dealership and throughout essentially all of our networking in the dealership today. So that data breach and the importance of Senate Bill 81 is critical. It will allow us to at least have our data stored on site, perhaps with another outside vendor, that could create a lot more competition in the industry that we do not have today. Certainly, had we had those capabilities, we would have been able to access that data and restore it. With this data breach that occurred back in June of last year, a lot of the data is still lost. We still can't restore it, particularly as it pertains to for a dealer like myself that's been in business for a long, long time and essentially used only 2 systems. So that's the impact that I believe 81, which is why I strongly support in the Senate, and all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisles did as well. And if there's a message I would have today is we certainly need Senate Bill 81 for all of our dealerships. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee.
From the House side now.
Yes, from the House. So, first of all, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you, and I'm not sure what direction you kind of want to go in with the panel, but there's a lot of different topics I would love to talk about. But before I go into it, I just want to kind of point out or shout out how what a great job GADA does for us and for our dealer network, and Ben, Leah, and Bill. They do an amazing job, and without them, it would be a completely different story of us sitting here today, because the way that our industry works, it's very independent-minded and very entrepreneurial-minded, and I'll go into a little bit about that, but we're we're strong, independent, small businesses, and without their help, it would be a drastically different story that we'd hear. But give me a little bit of background about my story. I'm Lehman Franklin, but my grandfather, who was also named Lehman Franklin, started this business in 1940 in my town, my small town of Statesboro. And it was, I like to say a staple business in that area where it developed and grew as the city grew. So now we are 2 different locations. We've got Buick, GMC, Chevrolet, and Toyota. And we employ roughly about 160 to 180 people, depending, within the community. Sell easily over, say, about 400 cars a month in the area. And service, I don't know how many, but it's a business that has been in that community forever. And the great thing I love about it is that we employ everybody that lives there is almost like family, because we've known them all of our lives. We know their children. We see their children grow up. We go to their baseball games. I mean, it's a very tight knit an area. And like I said before, that the business is set up so that we meet demands when it comes and innovate and change and shift. And it's very entrepreneurial. And when as the industry shifts, we end up shifting to be able to serve that community and the people that buy from us. So if you look back from 1940 to now, it's been drastic changes, but the core of it has been to be able to serve that community and to be able to give the buyers, the consumer, a face of that area. So now you have different challenges when people buy. If they have an issue with their car, they have somebody they can go to, and they can come directly to me, and we try to advocate for them to fix the car or whatever they need to do. But sometimes the manufacturer will allow that to happen, and sometimes they won't. But in that case, I know these people. I've grew up with them. I've known them all my life. I'm not going to let them go and ride without an issue. So a lot of times I'll eat the cost and take it on myself just so that they can have a good experience, because I know that, in return, their kids are going to buy from me, their sisters, wives, brothers, whatever, and we can service them again. We have that relationship that's built there. And so, and that's the trust that's being built, even with, when they're buying a car. For many people, buying a car is a very daunting situation because there's a lot of unknowns. And to be able to go to somebody that you grew up with and you've known all your life, it gives that peace of mind to be able to have reassurance that you're getting a good deal, a fair deal, and there's no hidden kind of craziness. So there's that's one of the main points that I wanted to stress with this, is that we're a huge advocate for the community and really the only source from us to the manufacturer to make sure that we are champions of that purchasing experience. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing I wanted to speak about. I don't know if there's any questions or anybody else wants to say anything on it.
I've got a question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the presentations. The thing that I love about car dealerships in North Georgia. So I've been in the banking business for 36 years. So, banks are community banks are involved in the community. And what I see about our dealerships, just wrote the 3 big ones down: Mountain Valley Motors, Bill Holt, some of y'all might know Bill, and then Tim Ford up at the Ford store there. But and I think this is true in most all the rural communities, how involved you guys are in the communities, as Representative Lehman had said there. That's a big thing, because you see, you go to church and you go to the ball games and you go to grocery stores and you see Bill Holt Chevrolet on every kid that walks through the store with a T-shirt on, but being involved in the community is huge for us, for smaller towns, and we appreciate the dealerships. I've helped finance several dealerships over the years, and just a couple of things I want to ask about. I know, is it still true? So your service departments? Does your service department still cover? Do you want your service departments to still cover a lot of your expenses? I'm sure that's old school, but I know when we used to look at financing dealerships and even dealerships that had been around for a while, we'd always look to see if their service department was covering a lot of their expense. Yeah. Is that a true?
Absolutely.
Yeah, true statement still.
Service
Absolutely.
We call that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where it's I would say the margins are pretty narrow, and you have to make your money in service. But one of the things that we do that's interesting that I could share with you guys is that we have we meet in groups. There's with NADA called 20 groups, and we are always striving to do better and to be more streamlined and to be able to have our processes working better. So we'll meet in these 20 groups, and what we do is there's 20 dealers basically. And we'll share our financial statements and our processes and how we do things and our ideas and what works, what doesn't work with the rest of these dealers. And we'll take the ideas that they have that are working well in their areas and the things that are working bad in their areas, and we'll come together and we'll try to, enhance the way that we do business and we do it better. So we'll take that back to our communities to be able to, to implement those processes, and they work really well. And so we have that source is that greater source that we could pull from as well, because if we didn't, it would just be kind of going on our own. And but I found that's been a huge benefit for us. And many of the, I don't know if you guys are in the 20 group or not, but many of the dealers that are, you can tell that they definitely gain and benefit from it. And that in return benefits from the customer having a better car buying experience or service experience.
And one other question too, if you're selling 400 cars a month, is that, I'm guessing 200 new, 200 used? Is that?
Yeah, I
in
think
the range?
different brands are different. I'm about half and half,
Yeah.
and that's the way I think it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions, and Ben, you may need to jump in. You mentioned earlier about China and China's automobile industry growing and being competitive with the automobile manufacturers in overseas sales. Do you see them trying to make inroads in the United States?
I'd say that eventually you got to think they want to, because we are one of the largest automobile markets in the world. Between us, Europe, and China, it's where the bulk of the new vehicle sales are sold. So I would think so eventually. Maybe not in the very near term, but you got to think that they're considering it in their longer term vision. That's my opinion. I don't know if these fellows have different perspective on it, but.
Guys?
I would certainly welcome the opportunity for more competition in the market. I believe competition just makes everyone better. We've seen their cars all over the internet. We've seen some of the capabilities. Certainly, as Ben has shared, their numbers have been steadily increasing. And I think right now in the United States, of course, Toyota probably has the lion's share of cars that are being sold in this country. They are certainly one of the market leaders, if not the market leader, particularly in the segment that they operate in. So given the Chinese and their ability to make cars efficiently and cost effectively, certainly the public would benefit if they were allowed to bring their product into the market in the United States. I would welcome it. Don't know about my other dealer friends here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, really? So y'all see that as an opportunity to work with another manufacturer?
And that's provided they have a franchise system, unlike a brand that's out there that does not. That this body granted the ability to sell direct. We all know a few years back we did when Tesla entered the market, they wanted to do direct sales. And we carved out in our franchise agreement the ability for them to do that. And certainly we were expecting other manufacturers as they come of age to follow the same, such as Rivian and some of the other EV makers coming into the market. I would hope that if the Chinese was allowed in the U.S. market, that they would value the benefit of the franchise system.
Well, I definitely agree with you that having a dealership and working through a dealership is an advantage to the customer by far. And I think Tesla is known for not trying to do that and trying to work directly with sales to the customers. But, you know, a wire comes loose, who are you going to go talk with? So, I understand and appreciate that perspective.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can just kind of interject for a moment, you mentioned Tesla and how they've kind of monopolized both ends of just the sales as well as the dealership operations. And I know the dealers here would have experience because we get those cars in as used. And it's really hard for us to recondition the cars. It's really hard for us to service those cars. We essentially have to send them back to Tesla to get them serviced. And when you have very limited facilities like they have in this area, you have a long wait time, and they get to dictate to you what the price is. It's not very competitive when we get those vehicles in the used market. And I don't know what the experience is with some of the other dealers, but I tend to turn them away because I know I can't service them.
One of my close friends purchased a Tesla for his wife and had some issues with it, and brought it to the store, and we were able to. She had damaged one of the wheels, and they were having to buy them in a set. And so we were able to help them find wheels and get them fixed. And he's a physician in Dalton, but he was really frustrated with having the whole process, and just couldn't get any assistance. So where did he come? He came to us to help him out with that.
Gotcha. And you mentioned trade-ins and getting them back and so forth. Is the second market on the trade-in vehicles, are they holding their value, or what kind of longevity do they have? I mean, with combustion engines, you know how many miles you're going to get on it. Talk to us a little bit about the EV thing.
Well, I'll speak first. I was an early adopter for it with my proximity on I-75. I put in chargers for my customers that have electric vehicles. I spent $600,000 on chargers, and they're used daily from Teslas, from all of the brands. But it's interesting you ask about the battery, because what I've had to learn with this is different chargers can have a different effect on a battery life, as opposed to gasoline. You put gas in it, you have 85, 87, 89, we all go to the pump, but different chargers can have can actually cause damage to vehicles. And so you have to be really careful with one of those to make sure that you charge it at the right place, or it could cause damage. Well, you don't know that when you go buy a pre-owned. There's just the uncertain piece of it. It's just like a cell phone. Again, mentioned that earlier. You don't know what kind of charger, if it's an Apple one, or what kind of damage it does to those vehicles. So you really don't know, and a lot of times people trade it, and then we have find out 2 or 3 months later that the battery life has been damaged, the cells in there, and they won't charge as good. And then what do you do? Do you have to help them get it replaced? I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainty with the battery and in those vehicles. So.
And I would certainly echo those comments. The problem we have with EVs is that you don't know what the value of that particular vehicle is, because you can't determine what the life is left on that particular battery. There are some industries kind of springing up that will eventually provide some indication of what the battery life is like, but you got to remember, on an EV, really the most valuable component on that vehicle is in fact that battery pack. And without knowing how many more times that pack can be recharged, they do get replaced, by the way, so it's not a big deal. We've in the Mach-E's that we have, we've cracked open a few of them, and we have to do that, but it's really expensive. And I don't know what the used car market is going to be in terms of EVs as more of them start making their ways to our lots, and how we're going to be able to determine the value of those vehicles given that huge unknown regarding the battery life. ICE, the combustion engine, it's very different. The country has well over 100 years of experience using that particular engine. But this technology, this emerging technology, is going to be a problem, and how big of a problem, we don't know right now, because that EV wave in terms of trade-in is getting ready to hit.
And And I'll share one more thing now. Could you talk a little bit about the hybrids? Because I always thought that the perfect marriage with an electric car and combustion engine was to buy an electric car and get a Briggs and Stratton generator and stick it in the trunk and have it ready at all times.
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit of that. So Toyota, we have almost all hybrids that we're selling, and they went that route. They didn't choose to go just a pure EV route, and I think it was a smart move by Toyota. When you look back at their choice and what they did, I think that they definitely came out on top of that decision, because you see a lot of the losses with the other dealerships not dealerships, other manufacturers that did that. But having said that, I mean, the EV product is a good product. I like it, and I'll sell them. They're great. I think that the way it was probably rolled out was a little bit too fast, too soon, but it's a great product. I'll sell it. I'll sell anything. I'll sell a tractor, a mule, or donkey, or whatever. And so I'll sell the EVs. In my market, though, in my area, there's only a limited amount that I do. I believe the market's a little smaller. I live in a rural area. I have Hummer that we sell, and Chevrolets and GMCs, and we've invested a lot of money to be able to do that, to be able to service them. I think we're probably around 400 to 500,000 right now, and that's a lot of money for a small business in my town. So we're doing that. And we're moving forward with it, and I've got Blazers now that I sell and everything, but there's just that amount of it. And with Toyota, that never came up with that issue because it was all hybrids, and I think that the customer, when they looked at it, they felt a little bit more comfortable with moving in that direction than making the jump to pure EVs because of the infrastructure that's already there or not there. So. Yeah, I'm really happy that I'm a Toyota dealer, I'll tell you that.
And then I'll finish it up unless anyone else has. Talk to me a little about the charging. You do a lot of charging since you're off the interstate. We had a bill, several years ago when we were talking about the service stations getting into the charging business. And we had testimony on that. At that time, it was really interesting. I think PowerPoint was one of the main distributors of charging equipment. Since we passed that legislation, I haven't seen a lot of charging equipment spring up at service stations, at least not in my area. Are you doing well with it? Just talk to us a little bit about that, if you would.
Well, that's an interesting question, because I had no idea what to expect with chargers, because we have Buc-ee's is probably 15 miles south of me, and charging a vehicle at Buc-ee's sounds a little bit better than coming to Fort of Dalton, but. Yeah, I'm amazed. I love to go and talk to people that are charging. I have 3 level 3 chargers. So a level 3 is just the speed of the charge. So you can charge an empty battery in 15 to 20 minutes, and the price of that's quadruple what it would be just out of your wall charger. But so there's an app that we connect with, and it's we just kind of like fuel prices. We're just searching for what folks are charging around us, and then so the consumer can see that app on their phone, and as they are planning their trip from Michigan to Florida or vice versa, they'll see our store on there and what the price is, and they'll pull in and charge the vehicle. It's interesting though with people that rent vehicles, they have no idea how to charge the vehicle. So I don't know if y'all have had any experience renting cars, but they're pretty readily available. But there's not a lot of places to charge them. And I've had people call us that have had to tow a vehicle into us that is dead to be able to hook it up to the charger. So, but I have 3 level 3s and I have 3 level 2s that are 24/7. And so we charge by the kilowatt hour. We don't really by the time I'll recoup $600,000, it'll probably be my great-grandchildren that'll get that. So I'm not looking at it as a revenue stream, but last month we had about $2,000 in charging income because people are stopping by to pay it. Now, my expense on that's probably $500-600. So, you know, there's not a lot of margin there, but I did it more of as a, you know, service for folks. So, but it's pretty interesting to hear, you know, you see them get out, they've got their dogs, the kids are running all over the parking lot, but again, it's just a service for us.
Did it increase your electricity bills? You said it was about $500 more?
Roughly, yeah.
Gotcha.
Don't really look at it that much in detail. I will now after
Yeah.
you've asked that, but yeah.
Cool. Well, we appreciate y'all being here this morning. Thank you for getting up early and coming to our meeting and making a presentation and informing us. If there are no further questions, we stand adjourned. And I've got some more questions, but